I would like to invite you all to check out a friend of mine, Tracy Rylands, who does an amazing website called Adventures in Cemetery Hopping. She has visited around the country, dozens of states, and she writes extensive articles and does photography as well. Be sure again to check out her website at adventuresincemeteryhopping.com. The next segment we are going to do is about Native American burial mounds. And this particular one is located in Ohio. Now, actually, I visited this place in February of 2019. This is another adventure that I had with Wendy Everett from the Graveyard Gals. We headed out early in the morning. We visited Enon Cemetery. After that, we went to the Enon Adena Mound. Now, we actually traveled around and looked on it, shot some photos around it, read the information. If you like Native American mounds, it's definitely worth stopping. I was able to traverse the mound and come over the top of it. It was pretty exciting because I learned some things about that and the trees that were on top of the mound. But let me give you a little background on this. The Enon Adena Mound, also known as the Knob Prairie Mound, was built, as mentioned, by the Adena people, which existed around 800 BC up until 1000 AD. It is located in Enon, Ohio, which is in Clark County. The mound itself is about 40 feet tall. It encompasses about 1 acre of land. It has a circumference of 574 feet, and it is about 110 feet across. Now, a long time ago, it actually was the center of a horse racing track around the early 1900s. That seems a little crazy. There was actually a state fair that was held there, and the Governor's Cup at the racetrack that was there happened at the state fair, which was kind of crazy. So there's actually evidence of that right there on Meadow Lane. Now, another interesting thing about this mound, John Smith of the Mormons fame made note of the Adena Mound, or the Prairie Knob Mound, as he was traveling out west. I thought that was pretty cool. One of the craziest things, I noticed the big trees as I went across the top, and it made me wonder, and I had found out that in research that there was an apple tree that was on top of the mound that spawned what later became the annual Apple Butter Festival in Enon, Ohio.
Be sure to check out the Cemetery Podcast website at thefuneralsource.org/cemetery-podcast.
If you travel to Spring Grove Cemetery in Cincinnati, Ohio, located in Section 15, you will find a very, very impressive monument. This is a 35-foot tall monument that has 3 statues at the base and 1 statue high atop the column. The statue that is atop of the column is Moses. The 3 lady statues that go around the tripod base are the symbols of friendship, love, and truth, which are the IOOF motto, because this monument is for the Independent Order of the Oddfellows. This monument was dedicated to the brothers who are buried at Spring Grove Cemetery, and it was unveiled in September 20th of 1881. It cost $25,000 to build, and it was collected through subscriptions and entertainment funds. And at the unveiling, 1,000 people were in attendance. You know, some of our friends have been working hard to bring awareness to our favorite subject, the Gals in the Graveyard. They're a duo of lady conservationists who enjoy a little bit of gallows humor. So be sure to join their journey. Like and subscribe by going to their website at galsinthegraveyard.com. Gals in the Graveyard, giving life to death. All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I am about to tell you one of the scariest stories that you are ever going to hear if you are someone who is a necro traveler and a cemetery photographer. November 2020. The Necro Tourist, we traveled south to the Carolinas. We were spending 3 days. Day number 1 was going to be in Asheville, North Carolina. Day 2 in Charlotte. Day 3 in Columbia, South Carolina. So, as we arrive in Asheville, we visit all the places that we intended to visit. Day 2, we arrive in the greater Charlotte area. Now, for those of you who are serious photographers, maybe you do like I do, and you carry multiple cameras. I carry 3. I often ping-pong back and forth based upon what the subject is, who it is, especially really important people. You know, some of the people we visited that day, like Billy Graham, I shot with multiple cameras because I sometimes get better angles, different camera shots. Anyway, so back to the point, is while we were in North Carolina, we decided to go to one of the most haunted cemeteries in the area, the Hopewell Presbyterian Cemetery. And we also went to Billy Graham's burial location, where there was also several members of his television show buried there alongside of him, and near him, rather. We then rolled on to downtown, where we picked up the Old Settlers Cemetery, which is another haunted location downtown. And we finally moved on to the really big one in downtown, or in the Charlotte area, which is the Elmwood Cemetery. This place is legendary. Couldn't wait to get there. Right beside it is the Pinewood Cemetery, and we go there as well. So we shoot all through there. We go on to our next day, which is Columbia, South Carolina. We picked up several of the big cemeteries there, and we continued to move on to wrap up our trip. Now, we arrive back. This is, again, a 3-day trip. We come back at the end of 4 days, or at the end of 3 days, and, we have practices as soon as we get in. How we do our loading, write our stories, unload our cameras, blah, blah, blah. We start doing what we do. Now, I don't know how many of you have actual cameras or you use your phone, but we use Canon equipment and we use Fuji equipment as well. Now, some cameras, depending upon what they do, your cameras will actually group your photos by days that you shot them, or some cameras will group them by the numbers of photos you shoot, say by the thousands. Also, another factor about cameras are, some of them, while you're unloading photos, batteries will die in the middle, or some are charging while the batteries are unloading. So anyway, I can't wait to get back because we have shot tremendous amounts of famous people in all 3 cities, and I'm looking forward to examining the photos. So I unload them. I actually unload the Canon photos, and I get them into the main frame that we use. Then I start to unload the Fujis, which again, I mentioned before, they do by the per photos. Now, while I was in the middle of shooting the group, the camera died. So I didn't really have a problem with what happened because I knew that I unloaded Group A from the Canon. I had unloaded Group A from the Fuji, and I knew when I got back when I put a new battery in, I needed to unload Group number 2 into the main frame and delete Group 1. So we began to talk about some of the things that had happened and what we'd experienced, the haunted things that we had seen, and we were looking forward to what the images were going to be that were the spooky images. Was it going to be orbs? What was it going to be? So when I got back into the battery, I put it back in, and I started to unload the cameras. And then we continued to talk about the other place that we had seen where the ghosts were known to walk around in the Hopewell Presbyterian Cemetery, and then we were really excited about the ghosts that were going to be at Elmwood. So as we were going to open up the photos and look at them, Suddenly there were none. 638 photos that were shot at the Hopewell Presbyterian Cemetery, one of the most haunted in North Carolina. The Billy Graham burial site. Photos gone. Elmwood Cemetery, one of the most haunted places in North Carolina. The photos were gone. What happened to the missing 638? 638 photos. Well, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, your worst fear and my worst fear. When I inserted the battery back in, instead of unloading Group 2 and deleting Group A, I deleted Group 2 and unloaded for the second time Group A. So by my own inability to have a double-check system or to stop talking rather than paying attention to how I unload my cameras, I lost 638 photos from Charlotte, North Carolina. All right, well, that just about wraps up the first episode of the Cemetery Podcast. I hope you all enjoyed it. Please give me some feedback in the comments and or some messaging, email, whatever you need to do. Get a hold of us. Again, we are with the Necro Tourist. I would like to thank my partner, Charlotte Graves, who does tremendous amounts of work for the show. She did, as a matter of fact, all the research for the show. And I would like to thank Wendy Everett, who was out with me on a couple of those shoots. And I would thank all of you for joining us on the show. Be sure to join us next Thursday when we will have another edition of the show. So until next time, this is Ken Negley for the Necro Tourist and the Cemetery Podcast. I'll see you in the yard.